Hello, everyone, and welcome to Megahaulin, a podcast based on the Wise Wizard game Star Realms. My name is Dustin, and I am your host. Folks, welcome to episode 118, recorded on January 17th in 2024. It's great to be back with you, and each and every time on Megahaulin, I am joined by my intrepid co-host, Rick Darklighter DeMille. Hey, Rick, how's your week been?
Very cold. Too cold.
Very cold.
Oh.
Are you having the lake freeze effect at this point?
I don't know. It's more than lake freeze. We were in, school got canceled 2 days. We were minus 30 with the wind chill.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was cold.
I don't want to tell you. It was the same temperature it is nearly every day here. 52 degrees. People will ask me why I moved out here to the Bay Area, specifically to San Francisco. And I tell them, well, I grew up in a place with 100% humidity. And I think 250 days out of the year, the temperature could be predictably 90% or higher, 90 degrees or higher, I should say. And the net of that is I now live in the equivalent of an ice box. I hope the pipes don't freeze. That's the thing that everyone's always worried about.
No, we're good. It warmed up to 1 degree today, so we're heading in the right direction.
We got that 1 degree. All right. Yep. Have you ever had a pipe burst in your place?
Not where we live. When I was in law school in Champaign, Illinois, we were in a house, but it was really old. When it got really cold, we had to hold a blow dryer to the faucet in the bathroom, like the shower faucet. Otherwise, It would freeze and we couldn't shower. When it did freeze, we would have to hold a blow dryer to the pipes to thaw them out.
I did not realize you were fighting Illini. You're one of the few people that went to UIUC that refers to it as Champaign and not Urbana-Champaign.
Yeah, no, and actually I lived in Urbana, so I don't know how to read that, but I call it Champaign.
I almost went to school there, actually.
Oh, wow.
I was considering going there for the computer science program. I took a tour of the campus. I saw the cornfield experiment thing that's out there in the middle that I guess has been there for hundreds of years.
Oh, yeah.
It seemed like a pretty good school, but I ended up sticking with UCF because it was in town. We're learning a lot about you over the past couple of episodes. Yeah. Every episode, what new Rick fact are we going to learn? Dear listener, if you have a specific Rick fact you'd like to learn, you can find us and drop us a line, and I will make sure I ask Rick that question. You can send us email, megahaulin@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook. We're in a fan-created Star Realms page community. You can find us there. Megahaulin at Gmail. If you've got a great question that we wanted to learn about Rick facts, write in and we will make sure that
or Dustin facts.
Okay, fine.
The mysterious Dustin.
The mysterious Dustin, yeah. I'm so mysterious. We also posted the last episode up on YouTube, Rick. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. It turned out really well, to be honest, and it seemed like a lot of folks appreciated that. So I guess we'll keep it going.
Sounds good. Yeah, look good.
I got a lot of compliments on the shirt I was wearing, so I had to up my game. I don't know if you can see the shirt that I'm wearing now. This is a tiki shirt, but it's a Jurassic Park tiki shirt. I don't know if you can.
Nice.
If you can see the T-Rex here. Yeah, it's a nice shirt. It's a nice one.
How many episodes will it take us for you to run out of these?
Oh, I cannot run out. I think. I mean, just wait till I get into the They Live shirts.
Okay.
I have 3 different shirts for just They Live.
I have one shirt. In fact, I was going to wear it for the next time we did this, and I forgot. I have one shirt worthy of your shirts, but that's it. So
I had mentioned that last time that I started the other channel, Wearable Fandom, and I guess a few folks liked it. So, if you want to find out more about these kind of shirts, or you just want to see me stomp around and wearing a heavy backpack, you can check that out as well. All right, Rick, this week we are going to be dedicating our entire episode. Maybe we'll get a little bit of competitive updates at the end, but the majority of our meat and potatoes of this episode is going to be an article that dropped just a couple of days ago over the holiday weekend, the 3-day weekend here in the US. Corey Bear was reaching out to me and telling me that he had an article, and he had already put it into the CMS and formatted it. And, a lot of times when people tell me they have articles, it's a link to a Google Doc. But Corey
Mm-hmm.
Bear had already gone above and beyond, had put charts and images and formatting, very little for me to do as an editor. And so I was very thrilled. But then I got caught up reading the article, and it was a doozy.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's what we're going to spend most of our episode talking about. So why don't we just switch gears and kind of jump into that? Of course,
Yeah.
I'm talking about an analytical approach to valuing cards, part 1 of N, written by Corey Bear. Corey Bear, the same guy we gave a hard time to about being a Dodgers fan last time. But this article is where we had a game of 4 decks written a long time ago by Homer Jr.
Mm-hmm.
This article takes the analysis of the game to another level. And before we dive into it, I want to let you all know I'll have a link to the article in the show notes or in the description here if you're watching on YouTube. But you can also just find it at megahaulin.com. Once the podcast post, it'll be the second article. But initial reactions here to Corey Bear's missive, Rick, what did you think?
It was awesome. It's not like the end all be all, but of how to value cards, but nothing is, because it's everything situational. Everything depends in Star Realms. But it was very interesting. And the fact that his analysis, the output had cards like Cutter and Arc as the high relative value cards of their cost, shows that he's onto something with this. Those are almost control cards. Like, we know that those are overvalued cards.
Right.
And so if he'd done an analysis and it showed those as like middle of the pack cards, there would have been something wrong. But, what he did kind of showed what we know, which lends some validity to the rest of the analysis.
I'll set the table a little bit about the background here. And of course, this article is it's not a ridiculously long article, but it is a long article in contrast to most of the articles we have on the Megahaulin site. Right up front, he mentions that he's wanted to grow skill sets with the analytical program R. And essentially all statisticians I know and a lot of data scientists I know will find their way into using R, the letter R, like R. And he employed a regression analysis against the cards to try to find relative value to the cost. And I think that's the really important thing here.
Mm-hmm.
What he's trying to say here is not which card is most powerful. What he's trying to identify is which card is providing excessive value for its cost, which is what you
Right.
just said. We've often thought that the Cutter is costed at 2 in the original vanilla set, but maybe it feels like it ought to cost 2.5, maybe not 3, maybe 3, but 2.5, somewhere in the middle, but certainly more than 2. So the value that you get for the Cutter at 2 exceeds the cost that you pay for it. And so he's trying to essentially draw a relationship between what you pay and what the relative value in a vacuum is. And I think that's a really important level setter, because some folks might have thought he was trying to give us a methodology to rank all cards. And like you said, so much is situational in Star Realms. This kind of analysis is something that I've been poking at for a long time. You've heard me say I'm trying to figure out, like, can I crack the puzzle of how they essentially take different elements and add them in that ultimately results in a cost. So what I had proposed maybe, I don't know, maybe 6 months, a year ago, something along the lines of being able to deconstruct combat is equal to cost X, right? One combat equal to whatever that should be. And see if I could reverse engineer the model that the designers must use when they're trying to figure out what should the cost of the card be. So an arc, it can scrap twice, it can draw twice, and then it can scrap itself to destroy a base. Okay, probably should cost 8. Oh, let's make it 7. And then they can kind of put their finger on the scale to give us certain cards that are going to perform disproportionately. The other thing that's really important to identify, this is the title of this article is 1 of N. So when you start reading in this, what I found is that this starts to prompt a whole bunch more ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And you start thinking about, well, what about? And he's like, whoa. This is the first step. So I'm hoping that this inspires people to follow in his footsteps, or for Corey Bear to keep going and try to, keep plumbing and pulling at the strings of this game until we kind of figure it out. I do hope, Rick, we will not get to the point where we actually can really completely deconstruct everything. I don't think that will ruin the game, because randomness still has a big factor here. Chance is still a huge part of the game, even when you know exactly how things are going to shake out. But this could unlock a way for us to create unique cards and then to feel that they're appropriately costed relative to different sets or to other cards.
What you said about deconstructing the cards, finding the value of each of the different abilities, that's really what his analysis is based on, right? A value for combat, a value for trade, a value when those are allies versus the to play abilities. And he found some consistency. So it, Wise Wizards in making this game they were consistent, not completely, there's anomalies, but like he has a graph in there of charting damage over the value of combat to, I think on the x-axis, it's like how much combat the card has when you play it compared to its value. And of course, it goes up. Like the more combat a card has, the higher the value is. But
Right.
it's almost not quite linear, but it's pretty linear. There's a jump from 3 to 4 damage, which he says is probably because at 4 you can kill bases. But then it's pretty linear, except for like a little blip at 7 damage. But that just shows that Wise Wizards, when they were valuing cards, they'd come up. I don't know. I'm sure they came up with cost at the end after they built the card. But there was some consistency in their method of assigning cost to cards.
Well, let's jump into a little bit of the findings that he had here.
So bottom 10, just so people understand, this is relative value. So the relative for these cards, their relative value compared to other cards of their cost, right? So if it has a value of 0, that means the cost was exactly right, basically. And a positive value means it's overvalued, means it's worth, like Cutter's over, it has a positive value. So Cutter its value exceeds its cost. And if it has a negative value, its value is lower than its cost. So it's not a great buy.
Right. So the 10th place ship here is the Mech Command ship, cost 8, has a negative 0.8 relative value. I think there's a couple of surprises on this list. The flagship at 6 has a minus 0.9. Then we get a supply bot at 3. It's a negative 1.0 relative value. How did you feel about the supply bot showing up there?
He did comment that he's not sure he has the value of cards that can scrap in hand or discard pile compared to scrap just from one or the other. He's not sure the values of those are straight. So that could account for some of this, but it did surprise me. I like supply bot still.
Battle Cruiser, I saw a comment there at 6, a minus 1. So this means it's a little overcosted for its value. He did add a comment that the scrap ability on Battle Cruiser, which is pretty significant, it's a game ender, to be honest, that might also be getting undervalued in the model. So I expect that with all of the questions and all of the feedback, maybe there'll be another one. Then we start getting into the Blob Alpha at a negative 1.1, roughly the same. I mean, the Blob Alpha is just a punch in the face, right? It's just a pure combat. I was a little surprised by that one, considering that it does 10 combat. Yeah.
It's a slow card.
And then we get the Battle Mech. The Battle Mech.
That surprised me. Again, it could be this, scrapping. Maybe it's not completely valuing cards that can scrap from hand or discard pile. I'm guessing why it's rated low is because it's a 5-cost card that gives 4 damage, which is pretty low for 5 cost. So I'm guessing that it's low because of the low damage for a 5-cost card. That doesn't mean these are bad cards. It just means that their relative value for the cost is low, right? So Blob Alpha is a good card. But compared to other 6-cost cards, it's saying its relative value is lower than other 6-costers.
And we'll talk about some ways that you might think about using some of this information. To be honest, I think it's too early to start really employing it firmly. I remember the Battle Mech, though, when a long time ago, this might have been the 3rd or 4th episode, I interviewed Phil Takata, and this was his favorite card, the Battle Mech. Yeah, at least at the time. I don't know if that'll be true today, but yeah.
It's a good card.
The Merc Battle Cruiser, I don't think this is a big surprise.
It surprised me.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe I overvalue it.
6 damage, draw a card, and you choose a faction.
Right. I really like that card, but maybe I overvalue it.
It's no Merc Garrison.
Nothing is.
We're coming into the top 4 of the relatively worst costed cards. The survey ship, and we know the good old survey ship, right? Draw 1, gives a coin, costs 3. That one's not a surprise to me.
No.
Though I do love though that it can scrap itself out. So I'm actually gonna predict that this relative value will adjust slightly. I don't think it's gonna radically shift, but I think that once the scrap modeling fits a little bit more tightly tuned, that this will probably move.
Could be.
And then we get the tried and true Explorer, Rick, a negative relative value of minus 1.2. This model is suggesting that the Explorer is the second worst card to buy in the game in a vacuum. That surprise you at all?
No, it doesn't surprise me. It's not that great, and that's compared to 2-cost cards, right? So it's one of the worst 2-cost cards, which doesn't surprise me, right? It doesn't surprise. Well, it's probably one of the worst cards. But Explorers you buy when there's nothing else there. When you're buying Explorers, unless you're chasing a bomb in the row, it's never because, oh, I want that Explorer. It's because, oh, there's nothing else.
I can see that. Now, the worst costed card relative to its value was the Mech Battleship. And this, of course, is Commander Lee's card. It's his special 8-coster that shows up. It's the card that I can never figure out what to do with. I always want to buy it because I feel like there's a secret to Lee and that I just don't understand. And if I buy this, then magically something's going to work, but I just can't get the juggle right in my head. I don't know. Or maybe it's just not a great card.
That's it.
You mean I'm off the hook at least a little?
You are.
All right. Well, that's good. Yeah, it's a rough
card.
one. Now, this model doesn't account for bases, and I'm not even sure how the base modeling would work, but I was happy to say that there is a card, at least for now, that is relatively the worst 8-coster that is not Fleet HQ. I'm just gonna point that out right now. But Rick, when we get there, what do you think? What do you think is going to stand? Do you think that the Mech Battleship is going to end up being the worst relative costed card, or do you think Fleet HQ or another card will supersede it?
It'll be interesting to see how he values defensive bases.
Yeah,
Fleet HQ gives probably 4 damage
on average,
maybe 5. I don't know how he'd value it, either as a 4 or 5 damage card. A base that gives 4 damage.
Yeah.
So it might end up being, the relative value might be lower, but it's a better card than the Mech Battleship. The Mech Battle. If I have 8 trade and there's nothing else I want, but there's a Fleet HQ, I'm almost always going to buy it.
Yeah,
it's not great, but it's not bad. It soaks damage, and
yeah, it's got a fat butt.
If I have 8 trade and there's nothing I want, and there's a Mech Battleship, I will just not buy. I'll just leave the 8 trade on the tail. I do not. This is a liability, this card. Unless you get it like deck 1. But even if you get a deck 1 and you can scrap down, by mid-game, you're going to be like, you're going to wish you did not have that card in your deck. It is a liability to your deck. So, I don't know. It's really bad. It's a really bad card. Yeah. One of the worst in the game. It's a travesty that Lee got stuck with this card.
As if his job wasn't hard enough already.
Yeah.
All right, so let's shift gears and take a look at the top 10 cards with strong positive relative value. Not a lot of surprises here. Well, let's go through them.
There's one surprise for me.
Okay. In number 10, we've got the Crusher, which is
that was
a
the
card
surprise.
I love. Crusher is a surprise for you.
It is, because it doesn't draw. Like, for relative value, most of these draw in the top.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm trying to see one that doesn't. The Cutter doesn't draw, but everything else draws. I don't know. I just surprised me. Crusher was in the top 10 over like the what's the other one? I'm going to look those up. There at the very end, it shows you the relatives. So Crusher, Ravager.
Oh yeah, the Ravager is a good card.
And Cargo Pod. So they have Ravager over Cargo Pod. They all 3 have positive relative values compared to the cost.
I was going to say, it's possible that scrapping from the row is also not completely appropriately valued in the model yet, because the Ravager can save your butt when you're behind on econ and then the big cards, the bombs start coming out and you just remove them.
I just totally confused Crusher with Ravager.
Oh yeah. The Crusher
Wait,
is just
which
6
would
combat and two trade if you ally.
I would put Ravager above it, or Cargo Bot.
I have the exact same opinion here. So let's keep going through. Recycle Bot showing up here at a nice one coster with a similar relative value. Any surprises there on Recycle Bot?
I guess this one doesn't draw either. I said they all drew except for Cutter, but this one doesn't draw. It
Yeah.
surprised me a little bit. It's a decent card. I guess what helps is that you can scrap it away. It surprises me to be in the top 10. I don't want to shift gears, but how low Trade Bot was surprised me among cost 1 cards.
Looking just in terms of scrap for scrap's sake, why wouldn't the Builder Bot be a better value than the Recycle Bot?
Well, Builder Bot can only scrap from discard, but Recycle Bot you can always scrap, pretty much, because it's scrap from hand. There's less of a chance of not getting the scrap with the Recycle Bot.
Yep, no, that makes sense.
And then there's a chance you can scrap 2 with a 1 cost card if you ally it. So I think that's why.
Moving through the list here, then we find Solar Skiff, which is a positive relative value of 0.8. This one was a pretty big surprise for me because I don't think this one is super highly valued on the card rater. What do you think about this?
It's not. I love this card. I love Solar Skiff. I think Solar Skiff is a sneaky good 1 coster.
Yeah, an opening game, it's a good buy for 1 and 2s. It's not in a must buy. For a second, I was like, it's not a must buy on Rick's list because I've looked at your list quite often and I was like, oh man, maybe I'm off.
I don't know if I'd put it as a must buy just compared to some of the other 1 costers in the early game, but it's a very good card.
Let's remember not to get high on our own supply here. This is just relative to other cards of the same cost. We're not saying that these are good cards or bad cards. These are just cards that may provide value greater than their cost suggests relative to other cards of the same cost. Like we got to keep that in mind. We just got to keep telling ourselves that. Then we see next up, we see the Predator. I'm not surprised about that.
No,
I love that card. But it's this card though. What's really interesting to this, especially when we're looking at the relative value of cost 2 cards. The Blob Fighter cost 1, does 3, and has the same ally ability as this card. It's interesting that that 1 extra combat is the main difference, or is it just that there are so many other really good 1 cost cards, relatively speaking, that the Blob Fighter ends up it's a very similar card, but it ends up falling off of the list?
It's a good question. And Blob Fighter it's decent. Just looking at its relative value is positive. It's looks like 1.75 maybe. So maybe it's probably just out of the top 10, the Blob Fighter.
Yeah, maybe that makes sense. That makes sense, especially considering how similar these cards are.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is a Peacekeeper with a positive relative value of 0.9. No surprises there. It's a great card.
No, great card.
Blobbot here, also not a big surprise to me. I love this card.
A great card.
Yeah, I love that card, especially if you can get a couple of them. It's so much fun. The Colossus, it's interesting because this card costs so much that it does more. It's giving you more than relative cost 9 cards here. So Colossus is a fun card, but I don't think that's a big surprise there either.
No.
Then we get into the Cutter. Okay, now we're in the top 3. And the Cutter costs 2. It has a relative value of 1.1. The absolute value was a 3.1. I thought that was really kind of interesting. It's not a surprise that the Cutter is up here, but that does kind of give us some support to the argument that we've been making in the past that Cutter should cost more. The interesting value here, it's suggesting that it should actually cost 3. We've been saying 2.5 or somewhere around there, but it's suggesting that it's actually appropriately costed at 3.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting.
Many people have made that argument.
Then we get to the Arc. which is suggested that it's a positive 1.4. So the way I'm reading this is that if you take the relative value and you add it to the cost, then you get the absolute value.
No, that's
So
exactly what it is.
the ARC by that measure should cost 8.4. It's giving you 8.4 worth of value for a cost of 7. I think we've always known this card was a little crazy.
And didn't he say that the scrap ability to destroy a base was messed up?
Yeah.
So ARC
it's
might be even
higher.
more.
Yeah, this could be 9. This could be an absolute value of 9 card. This is kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the headline on this conversation, though, is the blockade runner. And I think I remember when we did the reviews for these cards, and we were both like, "This card is awesome," and that commentary coming not just from what it does, but how much fun it must be to play a card like this, to be able to get this on your first turn, even if you're stuck going first, and still then be able to turn around and cycle things through. Any surprises by the fact that the blockade runner is up on this high of a level?
If you would have given me 10 guesses of what would be number one, I don't know. I have to be honest. I don't know if I would have guessed blockade runner. But at the same time, when I see it here, I'm not surprised. Like, it makes sense. I don't know if I would have thought of it. I can't take credit for that. If you look at what it does and how they analyze things, it's got basically 2 cycles, then it allies for a draw, and then target opponent discard a card. So of all the different like abilities that they're taking into account to add up the value of a card, there's a lot in here for a 1-cost card. So it's not surprising when you really think about it.
The thing that people are going to get excited about is Scouts and Vipers. And he actually provided an absolute value for Vipers and Scouts. The Viper is a negative 0.1 and the Scout is a negative 0.5. What do you make of that, Rick?
Well, I mean, it just comes to how... So damage is worth more than trade is basically how Wise Wizards valued their cards in creating cost. They valued damage over trade. So that reflects in Viper versus Scout, right? Because Viper's damage, Scout is trade. I do not accept that this is the conclusive, end of the argument. I'm still going to scrap my Vipers first, because getting rid of the Viper allows you to buy one of these higher value cards later on. The benefit you get of keeping a Viper over Scout pales in comparison to the benefit you get of being able to buy a higher cost card later on. So anyway,
you're right.
That's all I'll say about
that. Ever the diplomat. Rick doesn't want any part of that nonsense. Of course, I'm ready to wade right into it, but I agree. I don't think we're done here. There were some interesting takeaways. So there were 4 main takeaways. Overall, the cards in Star Realms are very fairly valued, which is a testament to the design, something that we've said for a long time. Part of what keeps people playing this game for a long time is that it's not a solved game. It's not a case where you just fall into one particular faction and you're automatically going to win. Number 2, the best value cards are generally already well understood. Yep, I think that's fairly evidenced through repetition. He says, remember, the value of a card varies from game to game and even within a game. Buying the best value card on this list is not a recipe for success. And I think that's exactly what we were saying earlier on in the cast here. This is just a starting way to value cards. There's going to be a lot more to be done here. We may get a little bit more precise, but even in that precision, there may be the moment when the mech battleship is the card to take.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I can't think of that time right now, but somebody must. And then he also offers a caution to beware of the implied precision of these results, especially those in the appendices, which the appendix of this article is fairly lengthy. This analysis isn't robust enough and makes too many simplifying assumptions to have a high precision result. So he's basically saying, don't blame me if you go on an 0-100 run when you apply these insights. Not my fault. And then he gives us a little bit of a roadmap, and I'm really hoping that he's able to follow up with this, doing some similar analysis for bases, which exactly has come up here. I think we'd love to see what and how those things kind of merge together.
Mm-hmm.
Working to figure out a better way to handle and assign values for scrap from hand versus scrap from discard or scrap from anywhere. Apply this methodology to heroes and gambits and see what happens. I think that'll be very interesting, especially when we start getting into the later heroes where they were filling some in. There's a lot of heroes that I think are going to have surprising positive value because their largest contribution is essentially scrap or for damage. So I do think that that's going to be interesting to see. Add a methodology to trigger value triggering ally abilities. And it kind of goes on. People can kind of read the rest of the article if they're really kind of curious about that. But I really thought that this was overall an outstanding and
Mm-hmm.
refreshing take. That's really how I felt. I felt re-energized about playing the game, and that there is some new secrets. This is not that dissimilar to like weighted on base, like WOBA. You're a WOBA guy. You're a stats guy for baseball, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you
Mm-hmm.
think about WOBA, or if you think about other stats that are similar that kind of tell you, they give you a value of that player and their performance in the context, in a very specific context. Huge thanks to Corey Bear, because this certainly might have scratched an itch that he had, not just to get better at R, but also to see what's going on in old Star Realms. But this clearly was a huge undertaking to even get to this phase of understanding and then to write it up. So what an awesome contribution. Thank you, Corey Bear, so much for enlightening us with these insights and for posting the article.
One, not to get back into the weeds, but one thing I asked about this, but the dual faction cards are probably undervalued in his analysis, or in other words, their relative value should be higher than what it shows,
Mm-hmm.
because he said it doesn't really, and that's one of his numbers or his items of like what to look at next. And one was a methodology to value triggering allied abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the dual faction cards, they're part of their value is the fact that they can trigger, two different faction abilities. And so it didn't really account for that because, for example, if you look at the 2-cost cards, the assault pod should be pretty close to Predator as far as value.
Mm-hmm.
Predator does 4 damage, it's a blob card, and it allies to draw. Assault pod does 3 damage and it allies to draw, but it's yellow or blue or green. So it can be triggered. That draw can be triggered by yellow or green, and it can trigger yellow or green abilities and other cards. So it might even be better than Predator, aside from the
Interesting.
damage difference of 1. So it's got to be close at least. But if you look at the analysis, the assault pod was really low, and a lot of the dual faction cards were kind of low. It seemed. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that surprised me that Blobbot was still in the top 10. So my prediction is when he does do that, that the Blobbot will jump. It's already in the top 10, but it'll go up to maybe the top 5 or top 4. Blobbot is a very good card. But so, some of the more nuanced cards, like ones that's the battle cruiser or the dual faction cards, take those with a grain of salt. But I guess normal cards, this is a pretty good valuation of those cards.
Right.
Yep.
I'm taking one last look here to try to find where the stealth needle ended up, and it may not be in the charts here.
So yeah, I know why. Also,
Okay.
Leviathan, Moonworm aren't there either. There were certain cards, I asked about this, that had unique abilities. The way he valued the abilities is through this regression analysis, is comparing them against other cards. When there was a card that had a unique ability, that was the only card with that ability, the analysis didn't really work. So
I see.
Leviathan, Moonworm, those cards that you take a card right into your hand, those ally abilities, Stealth Needle, copy another card,
Megahauler.
it didn't really give an accurate. So he didn't even include those
That
in
makes
this
sense.
analysis. So
Yep, that totally makes sense. That totally makes sense. Well, thanks again, Corey Bear. Some kudos. I think, Rick,
mm-hmm.
it's worthy for us to let this steep just a little bit more, and maybe the next cast or in a near term cast, we'll ask Corey Bear to come on and
Yeah.
maybe well, maybe we'll poll the audience for some questions that we can directly ask to Corey Bear. We've gone for almost 45 minutes talking about this. That's how excited we are about it.
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine how long it took him to actually get to this point. A lot more than
That
45
would be
minutes.
a good question for him when we talk to him.
Yeah. How long did this take? I don't want to say. I missed a lot of dodgeball games as a result of doing this analysis. I loved his little meme there, playing Star Realms, me writing the next article. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But let's switch gears here and hear about some results from competitive online Star Realms.
Yeah, just a couple of results. So Star Realms Premier Circuit, you probably haven't heard me mention that one in a while. That's one of the ones I run, and I took about a 9-month break, partially because I was busy, partially because I had some technical difficulties with the app I use. But over Christmas, I got that fixed. So we started up again. Season 5 started. We had the results of the first event of Season 5. Cranky Day was victorious, winning the first event of Season 5 over Rip. So congrats. And also, if you've been listening for a long time, we've been saying, in the Star Wars Premier Circuit, there's a ranking system, and the number one ranked player has been for a long time. Who was it?
Alderaan?
Corey Bear.
Corey Bear. Sorry, Corey Bear.
Corey Bear.
Alderaan's always a good guess.
It is. Always guess Alderaan. Corey Bear had been, I think, 10 or 11 events in a row. He was the number one ranked player. He has a new player has emerged as the number one ranked player in the SRPC, and that is Agent Seto. So congrats to Agent Seto for taking over. Hopefully he'll be able to hold on to it for a little bit.
He's a legend. He's a legend, mate.
Legend.
Literally a Star Realms legend. Wow.
And then the other result we have, congrats, Agent Seto. And the other result we have is in the War World Battle Circuit, Dion's Commanders League. Here's where your guess comes into play. Alderaan won that one over Sheridan. This was an event where you could play any commander but Yoakum. So Alderaan won as Vulcan, and Sheridan was second place with Nandi. I thought it was interesting. Nice. I was looking at the results of this, and in the top 8, all but one of the commanders was a blue commander. So one of the commanders that has blue. I don't know what that means, but I just thought that was interesting. You take out
they like
Yoakum.
The color. They just like the color.
So, but congrats to Alderaan for winning that one. I think he's won like half of the events in this current season of the War World Battle Circuit. So he's been doing pretty well. In that,
I'm loath to label him a specialist, but his brain seems specifically tickled by the command decks, and he seems to invest a tremendous amount of time playing in the events. So it's definitely captured his imagination for sure. He's put a lot of cycles in and had a lot of success. Congrats to everybody.
And I would agree. And it's not just with one commander either. He does very well with an array of commanders. So
that will play well when he gets to the top 8 or top 4 for the Legend tournament at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Rick, we've gone for a little while. We're recording this on a weeknight. We were so excited by Corey Bear's article, we had to get the recording in as quickly as we could. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. Want to let folks know again, if you want to read Corey Bear's article, head over to Megahaulin.com and you can find an analytical approach to valuing cards, part 1 of N, by Corey Bear on the Star Realms blog. You can also reach out to us and send us an email, megahaulin@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, Megahaulin, a Star Realms podcast, and Rick and I both frequent a fan-created Star Realms community page on Facebook as well. So you can find us there. Reach out, let us know. And if you've got questions for Rick facts or Dustin facts or Corey Bear insights, just send them my email and we will read them on the air and try to provide you with an answer as quickly and as fast as we can. We are continuing our regular cadence of recording and releasing bi-weekly, and our intention is to continue doing so. Hope you are all enjoying the cast. I'm going to ask for something that I haven't asked for in a long time, which is to go rate and review our podcast over on iTunes or on your favorite podcast service, wherever you find us. If it's Spotify or somewhere else, please drop us a rating, even if it's not a 5-star. Well, please make it a 5-star. But if it's not a 5-star, it's better to get your feedback so we know how to factor that into the show and make better shows for you guys. Well, that's going to do it. Until next time, keep correctly valuing those scouts. So long, everyone.
So long. Dustin, you're a 5-star.
Thanks, Rick.